guys, thank you for watching this video. I wanted to give a couple comments on the video that I watched last night, live stream by Anthony Rogers, and where Chris Lasala jumped in and they began to discuss the Ant-Nicene understanding of the Godhead. As you guys know, Chris Lasala, he holds to an Ant-Nicene understanding of quote unquote the Godhead, and obviously Anthony Rogers is more of a Trinitarian. He is a Trinitarian. He has a Trinitarian position of the Godhead, and so at some point in time, Chris Lasala joined the stream. And so I sort of got it in late. You know, I didn't catch it right when Chris joined, but when I did jump on the stream, I saw that they were head deep into this conversation. And so one of the concerning areas that Chris Lasala likes to bring up is the idea of how Tertullian, he believes that Tertullian held to more of an Ant-Nicene understanding of the Trinity. Chris Lasala likes to put a lot of emphasis on the idea of the Son being begotten, should I say, from the Father, coming out of the Father. So Chris's position would be lean more to Jesus, who we know as Jesus, not always being the Son of the Father, right? There was a point in time where he became the Son. There was a point in time where quote unquote Jesus in some real essence began to exist. So Chris Lasala would not give the understanding that Jesus was a person prior to his incarnation. He would argue that the Word was not a person, reason was not a person. And so he leans heavily on the Tertullian's explanation of the Trinity. And so, but Anthony Rogers, I believe, does a fantastic job at correcting Chris Lasala's error. And so I do want to comment, let you guys hear the conversation a little bit, then I'm gonna give my feedback and my thoughts on the conversation. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe to The Gospel Truth and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any shows that are coming up here in the future. With that said, let's get into this portion of the conversation I'm talking about.
Son. And by the way, he also says that the Father was not Lord prior to that point.
But you don't believe that.
Listen. Just listen for a second. The term Lord doesn't apply to the Father before there's a creation over which he can be called Lord. So the term doesn't apply to the person of the Father until he creates. He's still a person before that. He's just not called Lord. Similarly, Jesus is not called Jesus until he's conceived and born of Mary.
Not that we know of, yeah.
Well, so for Tertullian, this is how Tertullian explains things. Prior to the incarnation, Jesus went forth from the Father at the creation of the world. At that point, he's called the Son. Prior to that, he's called God's Word. Prior to that, he's identified as God's reason. Very clear that reason in Tertullian is a person.
Where did he call the Son reason?
Well, so first of all, notice the quote I already gave. I have to pull up the other stuff for you later, but right here, listen carefully.
He said the Greeks use the term interchangeably. They do that, but where did he call the Son?
No, he does that too. But listen. Although God had not yet sent out his word, he still had him within himself, both in company with and included within his very reason, as he silently planned and arranged everything within himself, everything which he was afterwards about to utter through his word. Now, whilst he was thus planning and arranging with his own reason, notice, reason is being treated as a distinct subject from the Father. He was planning everything with his reason. He was actually causing that to become, which he was dealing with in the way or word or discourse. That's a little, I think, ambiguously worded at that last point. But what I'm telling you is that Tertullian's overall thought is a bit more complicated than I think you've noticed up to this point. This isn't the way most people explained it, but it's not heretical because Tertullian wasn't denying the eternal subsistence of the Son.
Tertullian definitely...
He didn't think that the term Son applied to him from eternity.
Tertullian taught... Hold on.
He did think that the Son was a person from eternity.
All right, so there you go. I'm not going to play the whole thing. You guys can play the whole thing and watch the conversation for yourself. But the whole point is that I think Anthony Rogers done a fantastic job at explaining what Tertullian is saying. Tertullian is not saying that the Son did not pre-exist with the Father. What Tertullian is saying is that the Son, Jesus, was not always called these terms in eternity with the Father. So that's the whole point. So what Anthony Rogers is saying is that Jesus, who we know as Jesus now, was called Reason, and then he was eventually called the Word, and then he was called the Son in Jesus when he was born. So this is a succinct title that Tertullian has been giving Jesus prior to creation and after Jesus was born. So this is succinct titles that Tertullian was giving Jesus, and this is what Anthony Rogers is attempting to explain to Chris Lasala. But Chris Lasala is so stuck on this idea of Jesus being begotten from the Father, he's making it seem as though Jesus was eventually born for the Father. You know, Jesus didn't pre-exist as a person. He was sort of this idea, if you will. He was sort of this fabrication, but wasn't completely formulated, you know? And so I think Anthony Rogers did a fantastic job at explaining this understanding, because I think this very helps me as well to be able to deal with the understanding of Tertullian, right? Of what Tertullian understanding was. What was his interpretation, or what was his commentary on this subject matter of Jesus being the same substance as the Father, right? And so I really believe that this was very helpful. I really believe that this sort of sheds light on the inconsistencies of Chris Lasala and how he's not reading Tertullian in a fair manner. And so it should be very helpful to all of us as we listen to this conversation. I encourage you to go and listen to the conversation and how we should properly articulate and understand what Tertullian is saying, so that we won't fall into the same pitfalls that Chris is holding to. It seems very, very clear. It seems very, very clear that Chris Lasala really leans on Tertullian for his position. I don't think that he can get that position from many of the church fathers as it concerns this, the apostolic fathers. I don't think he can grab this position and hold cling to this position because the language that Tertullian uses can be a bit ambiguous, and it can be very difficult to sort of sift through. But nonetheless, I think it's quite clear that Tertullian did see the Son, or Jesus, the Word or Reason, as a person that pre-existed with the Father. And so on that breath alone, I think Anthony Rogers did a fantastic job. And I think on that breath alone also that Chris Lasala really doesn't have a foot to stand on when it comes to his rejection of the Trinitarian doctrine. I do believe that Chris needs to go back and sort of take a step back and rehearse or rehash, should I say, this documentation, these writings of Tertullian, and really come to a better and more concise understanding, take consideration the type of language that Tertullian is using to clarify his position within the historical context of his explanation as well. And so once again, I think Anthony Rogers did a fantastic job. I think it's very helpful for us to really go through this stuff. And I encourage everyone to go and check out the full conversation, because once again, this is just a snippet of it. But I think that Anthony Rogers did a fantastic job, and I do appreciate Brother Anthony Rogers for his clarification and challenging Chris Lasala's understanding of what he may think Tertullian is teaching as it concerns the Trinitarian doctrine. That's all I have for you today, and I thank you for jumping on and checking out this video. But if you appreciate this content, make sure you subscribe to The Gospel Truth and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any shows that are coming up here in the future, any commentaries, debates, or interviews. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. All right, thank you, take care, God bless.